What is up, you guys? Kyle here again, and welcome to yet another episode of FAQ'N Friday. Appreciate you being here as always, and psyched to answer you guys' questions. Before I start the questions, I have a quick announcement. My band, Bushido Code, has our first show in a year and a half, and our first show after the new full length has been released, so I'm super excited to get out there and play these songs. We are playing in New Jersey. Flyer is right here, if you guys want to check it out. But anyways, yeah, we'll be playing a show on Memorial Day weekend. It's a Saturday. Gonna have a good time. Lots of good bands there. If you guys are in the area, please come out, check out the show, and feel free to come up to me and chat gear as much as you guys want, because you guys know that I love talking about gear, and hang out for a little bit. I'd really love to see you guys there if you're in the area. So yeah, again, save that flyer, check the show, and hope to see you guys there. All right, so we're gonna jump right into it. First question comes from my man, Benjamin Gerard. Hey man, what are the songs in the background? I'm a big fan of Synthwave, and I liked what I heard. Benjamin, those tracks are by a guy named Jim Hall. I actually found them on a royalty-free music site and downloaded them, and I actually think they're great. I'm a fan of the Synthwave stuff too. Actually, Derrick, my other guitarist in Bushido Code, got me into that stuff. If you haven't listened to Gunship is absolutely incredible. They have a few albums, and they're like all just awesome 80s synthwave stuff, and it's really cool, just like driving music or zoning out music. It just puts you in a zone, and it's all really catchy. But yeah, I'm into that stuff a lot too, so that's why I chose to put something a little bit different in the back of the FAQ videos. I figured it makes it a little bit more listenable than having metal in the background all the time. But you guys tell me. I'm curious what you guys think. Brian Angiel asks, have you ever considered adding a modeler to your collection? It would be interesting to see you compare Axe or Helix models to the amps in your collection. I actually have. I bought an AX8 after using one in the studio to track the DI tracks for the Bushido Code stuff last year, and really liked it. But when I got it, I had a hard time kind of figuring out how to dial it in and make it work. And I have a very short attention span, so if something doesn't click for me right away, I pick things up quickly. If that doesn't happen, I usually just move it on. That's just how I am, unfortunately. So I ended up selling it, but I happen to have a good friend who accidentally ordered 2 quad Cortexes, and I'm going to pick one up off of him this week. So I should have one on the channel next week to check out. I've heard a lot of really good clips. My friends have been sending me good clips and just singing praises about the quad Cortex. So what I've heard is pretty inspiring. I know it's got mixed reviews, mixed fanfare, but it sounds pretty convincing to me. So I'm gonna get that. And then once I have that, I'll do some demos with it. But also, I was thinking about doing some amp and pedal captures for you guys as well, and offering them up on my Patreon, maybe a new capture or 2 every month or something, different versions. We'll figure it out. We'll have a little talk, you and I, we'll figure out what you guys want, and then I can start offering some cool captures of my amps, the way that I would dial them in, and some different options. I think it would be a lot of fun to do that. So yes, Neural Quad Cortex will be on the channel very soon. The Toe Cutter asks, or I guess he just says, you need to get a Driftwood on the channel. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm actually working on that. I had a dealer, Northerner Guitars in Canada, offer to send me one to check out. So I'm kind of working on the details of that with them. So thank you to Northerner Guitars for reaching out. My other guitarist, Jason, he had the big 100 watt, and he also has the Mini Nightmare, the little 44, 45 watt, whatever it is, with the sizzle built in and the tube screamer, all that stuff. I'm not super familiar with what options come stock and what ones don't. But anyways, he brought that thing to practice and it sounded nasty. So now I am really interested in getting a Driftwood, specifically the Mini Nightmare and specifically with the sizzle switch on my channel. I thought that thing sounded fantastic, and that's definitely an amp that I'm hunting for to get on here in the near future, because it was really good sounding at practice, and I really want to run it in some cool demos and compare it to some other awesome high gain amps. Nick Harper asks, what type of tuning is your favorite? Are you a fan of standard / drop tunings and or guitars with 7 strings or more? I personally like the way drop tunings sound. I don't like playing in drop tuning as much though. For a long time, all I ever played in was drop C, because I was in hardcore bands and drop C was pretty much the go-to hardcore tuning for a long time. So yeah, I would say I like the way that drop tunings sound, but I love the snappiness and the quickness of standard tuning. It's just, there's something about it. It's so punchy, it's so clear. It's got all the right frequencies for me. I just really enjoy the way that standard tuning sounds over anything else. So, but yeah, to my ear, standard is the most fun to play based on feel and based on tone. That's just what suits my ear the best. Drop tunings are fun. I've got a 7-string that I messed around with a little bit. I really need to get that thing into good playing condition so I can play it more on the channel for you guys. And I think they are fun. I think drop tunings sound really, really mean. They have their place, absolutely, and I listen to plenty of bands that play in drop tuning. But for me, it's just E standard is where it's at. So Marvin Martelli asks, hey Kyle, how do you feel about cheap gear versus really expensive gear? I actually, for a long time, have been an advocate of cheap gear. If you can believe that. I know I've got a lot of expensive amps and expensive guitars, but you can get 95% of the way to the really expensive stuff with cheap gear set up the right way and dialed in the right way. In my opinion, there are some really, really good amps on the used market especially that cost next to nothing that sound phenomenal. So if you find a used PV XXX, a used 6505, you find one of the Jet City amps for used for a cheap price. I know the prices on those have gone up. I'm not sure what's up with that lately. Used JCM 2000s are still, in a good price range and sound great. There are a lot of lower cost amps, and I guess it's all relative too. Some people may view those as expensive pieces of gear, so it really depends on what you consider cheap versus expensive. For me, cheap is an all tube amp for $400. That's cheap, especially right now. I mean, it's really hard to get anything in the all tube range for $400 on the used market. But to me, a really expensive amp in comparison is like a Friedman Butterslacks, which is going to run you close to $3,000. There's a big price gap between $400 to $500 and $3,000. So I consider $400 or $500 a cheap tube amp, $3,000 a really expensive amp. In my experience, yeah, you can get almost all the way to the really expensive stuff if you piece together your gear correctly, the right pickups. You have to be selective, especially when it comes to like what type of tone that you're trying to dial in. But I would have no problem right now going out and playing a show with my PV XXX and a JCM 2000 through my crate blue Voodoo cabs with V30s in them. All in all, I probably have in that entire bundle $1,000 into that entire rig. And I could use like an LTD EC401 that I bought for $300 as the guitar and be into that for, $1,300. Throw a boost in front, boom. I've got a huge stereo rig that sounds amazing for $1,300 versus I could pair my Friedman and my diesel and my Friedman and my diesel cabs, and you're talking like almost a $10,000 rig, take it out, and it's gonna sound different. Will it be better? That'll be subjective, honestly. That'll be totally subjective. There are things I've noticed about more expensive amps. They tend to have a little bit more clarity. They tend to have a little bit more like harmonic content and stuff like that. But in the context of a band setting, live especially, you're gonna have a hard time picking those things out, especially if you're not a gear nerd where people really don't care. To be honest, 95% of your crowd is not gonna care what guitar gear you're using, and that's a sad fact that us gear nerds really have to come to terms with. But there's so many different factors. I'm gonna make a video based on everything that I'm talking about right now. Does cost matter when it comes to gear? But in my opinion, if you don't have the money for super expensive gear, don't think about super expensive gear, because you can get awesome tones for much, much less out of some of the great used stuff on the market and really be completely satisfied with them. When I started jumping into the really boutique amps market, I was disappointed with a lot of the stuff I played because I was expecting to get it and play it and just think that the angels were gonna sing as soon as I hit my first chord, and I ended up being disappointed with a lot of the amps that I tried. There are some that blew me away, but at the same time, most of them, it's very subjective, of course, but I ended up just going back to a good EVH 5150 for a while until I really got my Splon stuff and enjoyed that. And now that's kind of considered boutique as well, but on the used market, you're talking $1,200. So it's not as big of a price gap between, say, a PV and a Friedman as it is between a PV and a Splon. The Splon's much more obtainable and still sounds absolutely incredible. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of getting the most out of the least amount of money you can when investing in gear, for sure. Which is why I like to feature really cheap amps on this channel, even though some people kind of tend to complain about them. I like to show that you can make amps that don't cost a lot sound really good. Of course, that's subjective. I think they sound good the way that I dial them in. Just being completely honest, you guys may think that they sound bad, but you really don't have to spend a fortune to get amazing tone. You just have to really know how to dial your gear in, and also you have to know how to play too. That's the biggest factor that a lot of people don't really realize is their hands. But we're not gonna get into that subject because that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. And that's going to be the last question for me today. I hope that you guys have a great day. I hope that you enjoyed these questions. I enjoyed answering them. Would really appreciate it if you leave your questions down below in the comments next week. Go down in the description of this video to check out my support section if you want to help my channel grow. It's appreciated as always. If you're not subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button on your way out so you don't miss the next video. Kyle here again. We'll see you guys next time.